In the United States, two stories unfolded almost simultaneously, one inside the nation's highest court and another inside the shifting, turbulent world of American politics. Separate events, yet both carried a sense of weight, urgency, and historic consequence. It began with the decision from the Supreme Court, a ruling that commentators described as significant, far-reaching, and in some ways history-shifting, not because of its political impact, but because of the constitutional questions at the center of it, questions about authority, limits of power, and the boundaries of federal and state control. As the news broke, analysts across the country paused. Legal scholars began dissecting each line of the ruling. And once again, Americans found themselves revisiting debates that stretch back decades, debates rooted in interpretation, precedent, and the steady evolution of institutional power. The details of the decision spread quickly. For some, it represented clarity. For others, complexity. But for everyone watching, it marked another chapter in a long legal story, one shaped by a court that continues to define the framework of the nation's laws. And while the country was still absorbing the implications of this ruling, another development emerged, this time from within Congress. Reports surfaced surrounding a phone call involving Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and former President Donald Trump. According to public statements and media coverage, the Congresswoman described or shared details from the call, creating a wave of attention, commentary, and speculation. At a moment when the Supreme Court had just released a major decision, at a moment when political strategies, alliances, and internal party dynamics were shifting, this reported call added yet another layer to the unfolding narrative. But to understand why the story drew so much notice, we must step back. Phone communications between presidents, current or former, and members of Congress are not unusual. They happen regularly, often privately, sometimes publicly, depending on the circumstances. What made this one notable was the decision to reference it so openly, and the immediate reaction it generated. Different sides interpreted the moment through different lenses. Some viewed it as political coordination. Others saw it as internal conflict. For many observers, it became another example of how modern politics unfolds not only in committee rooms and court chambers, but also through statements, interviews, and the rapid pace of digital information. As commentary spread, the question grew larger than the phone call itself. What does this moment say about the current state of political communication, which, in a chance, about tragedy and about the increasingly blurred line between private conversation and public messaging? Meanwhile, the Supreme Court's decision continued to ripple outward. Legal experts examined its potential long-term effects. State governments and federal agencies considered how the ruling might influence policy. And within think tanks, universities, and newsrooms, deeper analyses began to take shape. Two separate events, one grounded in law, one grounded in politics. Yet together, they offered a snapshot of how American governance moved quietly in courtrooms, loudly in public statements, and unpredictably in the spaces between. For the public, these developments raised familiar questions. How do institutions adapt to shifting national challenges? How do political leaders communicate during periods of uncertainty? And how do major decisions, legal or political, shape the landscape that millions of Americans live within as the news cycle continues? Both stories remain at the center of ongoing attention. The court's ruling will be studied for years, perhaps decades, its effects unfolding gradually through policy and precedent. The reported phone call will continue to be discussed as part of the broader political climate and environment defined by rapid communication and constant scrutiny. And so the nation watches from courthouse steps, from congressional hallways, from homes, workplaces, and screens across the country as both history and politics continue to develop in real time, quietly, loudly, and always with consequences that reach far beyond the moment.